With no further ado, I'm just going to present our next speaker, Jasjit Singh. So Jasjit is a head of product. Thanks, Leila. Is head of product, and please stay with us if you don't mind. Is a head of product at OLX Group, and he's also a speaker, a mentor, and a product coach with over 14 years experience in technology and product management. Is also one of our speakers at Productized Conference this year. And the subject of his talk today is about product development at OLX. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so you can start sharing yours, Jasjit, and welcome. You're joining us from India, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Thanks for the introduction, Andre. Cool. So let me share my screen. So, yeah.
Good.
Cool. So today will be fun day because I think we have, when I was designing this talk, I was thinking about like, what is it that makes a product manager, right? And the image that came to my mind was Mr. Bean, right? So why Mr. Bean? Because when it comes to Mr. Bean, I think he's childish. That's the curious part of us, right? That's where is really hard to us. We are selfish when it comes to goal objectives, the things that we want to achieve, and extremely competitive, right? Like we want to get things done, get things out in the market as soon as possible, deliver results, right? That's exactly what our situation is in even in this chaos. I think most of us are working towards like, can we use this time best to kind of bring out the right products for the customers, for the users, and deliver results, right? So that's who we are. But there's a slight gap, right? Like, can we structure this a bit for Mr. Bean to be more successful in the competitive environment that he is in? That's where I think I wanted to relate to some of the experiences that I have had in OLX and would want to relate to kind of the processes that we follow. Next, so when you look at it, who am I? I am Jasjit. So again, about 14 years of experience in HCI technology and product, and I've worked in various global organizations in India and in India as well. But that's not important. The most important part is why, right? Like, why do we want to kind of go into a responsible product development? That's what even Mr. Bean feels, right? Like, why would you do that, right? And that is where this first question is very important for a product manager. Like, more often than not, I think if you ask almost everyone out there, right, what does a product manager do? Oh, we'll get all kinds of responses, right? Like, he is a coordinator between between business and technology. Well, can't they just talk to each other and get things sorted? I don't know. So like, and sometimes he's someone who is kind of taking a PRD over to the tech team. He's a juggler of sorts. He's the overall owner. Some call him the CEO, right? But these are all vague, right? Like, if you really ask the question, why do we need a product manager? I think the fundamental part is this, right? This is an ideal world. If I had infinite problems, infinite resources to work on those infinite problems, to deliver infinite outcomes, I don't need a product manager, right? Like, you would have problems, you would solve them and iterate, right? Like, everything is amazing. But that's not how the real world works, right? The real world is this, where you have infinite problems, fortunately, unfortunately, right? For those infinite problems, you have finite resources, and for that finite resources, they can deliver finite outcomes, right? So that is where you need someone who can basically look at more of due diligence, more understanding of what problems should we be solving, and why is it that we are solving that problem, right? And so that, like, by the time we reach the resources to kind of work on those problems, I'm actually really bad. I call our developer friends as resources, but ultimately it's the finiteness that is more important over here. So if you have infinite problems, there needs to be someone who kind of looks at what are the right problems to solve, right? Which of those problems which actually deliver impact, right? should we go after a certain problem or not? Is it relevant to go after a certain problem in a certain market, right? So that is where the problem itself becomes very important, right? And then once you figured out, okay, these are the right problems to solve, what are the right solutions, what are the solutions that work for that problem, right? So that like what you design is actually delivering impact. So this is a real world scenario, and that is where this why part becomes very important. And for Mr. Bean, this is also very important to understand that it's okay to be chaotic all over the place, but be all over the place. But if he can bring chaos to a certain elements, I think that is where you have more meat to get, more outcomes to that you could get, right? So let's go further, right? And the other element or a dimension of this why is, uh, when you look at the typical development cycles, right? So that's what I was referring to. Like you start off with a clear need and objective. So a lot of due diligence is done at this point of time, right? You start building hypotheses. Once you've started building hypotheses, then you either experiment or you build it. So I think when you look at this graph, right, where do you think you will have the maximum time or effort that is needed, right? The maximum time or effort is over here, right? This is all in the brain. This is all in, like, while talking to users, you have not actually put in a lot of effort to develop things. This is where you take a lot of time and effort to kind of do that. So before you hit this point, if you have not done enough due diligence, you're more likely to do screw up and kind of take more time to actually deliver things into the market. So that is where your outcomes of the input that you put and the output that you get, like, it goes by 10x, right? So this is very crucial that before you just do this, you do a lot of due diligence. So that's exactly why we should be doing this, right? Now the comes the how part, right? So I think all product organizations across the world have kind of come up with some mechanism, some framework, some things that basically work for them. And in different scenarios, there are different emphasis that need to be addressed. But when it comes to a general strategy of how do you do responsible product development, I think Mr. Bean also kind of also looks into it and says that that sounds like a bad idea. Let's do it. So because I think more often than not, the proof is in the pudding, right? How do you do this? So let's go one by one, as a step by step, into the how part of it, and then let's understand what does that mean for us. So first is, like, the first step. I think this is what we follow at OLX, and I'm happy to answer any of the questions that may come out of of this framework. But that's how we follow our work, right? So again, the first part, the most important part, is the OKR setting, right? OKR setting, as you know, the objectives and the key results. It happens across the organization, and as it happens across the organization, we also look at, like, from a high level to a low level, how these goals percolate, and what are the key matrices that we should be going after. Sometimes it is more of the loops, the core loops in the product that we want to improve. Sometimes these are strategic investments, but overall, like, I think there is one level of alignment within stakeholders, both from product, business, technology, that these are the certain objectives that a squad or a cross-functional pack could own up, and over a period of time start delivering results, so that we can actually measure and see if these matrices are actually making sense. And to be honest, I think this is an interesting journey. Like, if someone tells you that just go into that OKR method process and all your problems will be sorted, I think for the first 2 or 3 quarters, you don't even get a hang of what a OKR would actually do to you, right? So I think it's an evolution that takes time, wherein you need to understand that it's not just about a feature set that you're promising business, technology, or anyone else in the market. It's more about, like, what is it that you are going after and why are you going after, right? So over a period of time, you get more comfortable and become more resilient to, like, what are the things that need to be done over there. And this, mind you, gives you a lot of flexibility. Based on the OKRs, you have a problem opportunity backlog, right? So whenever you look at an objective, right, and a key result, you look at, like, what are the key problems that are there for that objective, right? So again, I'll be talking about the what part, like what do you do to make that happen. But first part is like, how do you build that problem? How do you build that problem hypothesis? How do you validate that problem hypothesis? And then onboard people so that like these are the problems that you think are interesting enough, and gather input that is that enough, is it good enough for us to kind of either look into validation, either look into like further investigation, or what are the things that need to be done to make it happen, right? Next comes the solution discovery, wherein what we do is like we now we have figured like, okay, these are the problems that are very interesting, and basis that we have also validated that these are the right problems to fix. Now we look at like, for these right problems, what are the right solution or alternatives or variants that we should be going after. Once we have identified, okay, these are the right these are the things that possibly could solve that problem, you look at how do you validate these solution variants, because sometimes it may be a mixture of those, sometimes it could be one of those. So how do you bring that together so that you first identify the right problem, now you are identifying the right solutions, and then you start also aligning the stakeholders. I think more often than not, like in our industry, uh, usually what happens is that we tend to work in silos, right? We like everyone has that, as I said, right, we are super selfish, we want to kind of own a lot of things. But to be really successful, I think what I've realized over time is that the more you're open with your stakeholders, the better feedback that comes, that improves your product, and also it improves that relationship on how do you take that product into the market. So that is where the aligning of the stakeholders becomes really crucial. And the last is like, once you have done this, you have aligned your stakeholders, you have built a solution, you have validated those solutions, you look at like, should I be going into a full blown rollout? Should I be doing a small rollout? Should I be doing kind of an experiment to learn more, right? What is the known, what is the unknown, right? And start demoing concepts or collecting feedback on the experiment that you would be running out. So this basically is the how part of this. And how basically is like the core steps in our journey while building from an idea or a objective to an end outcome, and then basically iterate on top of it, right? And the next part that is even more important is the what, right? So again, like you started off with why you are doing this, we broke it down into how. Now in order to execute the how, you need the what, right? And what does he say? Oh, we can't, yes, we are kind of serious over here. So what happens is that what does the product manager do to follow the RPD? One, from the OKRs, like what happens is that within the organization, you have already identified what are the core loops, what are the core objectives of that of the organization, right? And what does it mean for your group versus some of the other groups? How basis your competence, basis the things you have done in the past, basis what you know of the ecosystem, basis what you can learn, you identify those ownerships and some of the matrices that deliver that impact. So that's how you kind of go further into OKR planning. So typically we would bring all the product stakeholders and also the business people into a meeting wherein we kind of go over like a proposal wherein we kind of say, okay, these are the things that we delivered in the last quarter. This quarter, this is what we think are some of the core objectives and key results. And then we have a kind of a debate on like, is that something that is making sense, and is that aligning with the overall vision of where you want to land? And that is where the whole OKR planning session comes. Post that, now comes the real deal, wherein now you start looking at like, what was the first step? The first step was you're building hypothesis, right? Problem hypothesis. So how do you build problem hypothesis? You look at historical data, market trends, feedback to the customer support. So ideally, like these are the various lenses through which you can understand the problem better, understand what your user is going through, and then you look at you also then basically would want to validate this further. So once you have identified, okay, these are the core problems that are there basis this, you look at primary or secondary research or funnel data to validate that is that indeed a big enough ROI that would be there, if you would solve this problem, right? And that is where I think we also typically what we do is have this discussion with stakeholders as well to bring them on board that this is super crucial for us to kind of go ahead and solve it. Once this is done, then comes the solution discovery, wherein now, if you look at the how part of the solution discovery, the key steps were that you would want to build solution hypotheses and validate them, right? So again, the simple design principles that are across the world, we use them. Like for example, we would diverge, ideate on a lot of concepts that would possibly solve the problem, or or some elements of that problem, right? And then you'd like look at like what are the various the second part is when you converge them, and then you look at like what are the best solution opportunities or a combination of those opportunities that solve that particular problem. And then once you are done with the converging, then whatever the other variants that you're thinking, you align with stakeholders and inform them that this is possibly some of the things that you would want to work on, and also run it by them so that they can further gather feedback from the market to understand if it is working. So all these steps that I'm saying is not something that we take months to kind of do a iteration. These are quick things, right? These are like some of the quick wins over there. I think is what we kind of do more. Where should we invest more time? Where should we invest less time? I think this is something that I would be talking more in the Productized conference of how do you make more intelligent decisions into validation, and how do you make it more science than an art right now. So that's where I'll be talking more about that. But as of now, I think this lays out the overall framework in which your problem opportunity could be addressed, and then the solution discovery should be addressed. And then basis the risks and unknowns, you take a call that how do you want to experiment that, what are the matrices that you would be tracking, and what are the success criteria, right? So this is how the what part of a responsible product development. And the when you look at this, right, like then you tend to ask yourself, right, is it very overwhelming for us to adopt such a thing? Because I think there are a lot of steps, right? So it seems like there are 4 or 5 steps, right? So what we did was we started with a cheat sheet, right? We said that, okay guys, to roll this out, it will be very complicated for everyone to comprehend, like what are the things that you need to do, how you do it, and what you do it. So what we did was that we asked ourselves, like, can we come up with a list of questions that we should be answering while developing an initiative or a story, right? And the list of questions, in that list of questions, can we also prioritize, right? What are the 3 or 4 questions that no matter what we do should be answered? And then there is a list of auxiliary questions that we should. And this is where we kind of looked at, like, what are the question framework that we should be asking. So again, we relied on the core principle that product managers are inherently curious. So why not frame it in a list of questions so that they can ask themselves while they are crafting out the story. So that is where, like, this set of list of questions that came up, and the first part, the questions on the problem opportunity backlog, we've taken up it from Marty Kagan in his so he wrote a blog on problem opportunity. So in that, what we did was, like, let's not overwhelm the people, right? Let's not overwhelm the product managers who are coming into new. So what we did over there is, like, let's ask the first 4 questions to get us a good understanding of what is it, right? And then we further expand into rest of the questions. So questions are really simple. It's no rocket science. One, exactly what problem will it solve, right? I think this was something that was brought in by Duncan in the OLX group, and for the most part, I think this was where it was a life changer event for me, wherein actually, like, I could now ask myself questions that helped me in my product development, right? So, like, what problem does it solve, right? For whom are we solving this problem? How big is this opportunity? What are the alternatives out there, right? Why are we best suited to pursue this? Why now, right? How will we get this product to market? what will we measure, like what are the matrices, right? What factors are critical to success, how, given the above, what's the recommendation? So again, like very simple questions, but they kind of clear it up very well. And then on the discovery backlog, I think this is something that we are still iterating. I think most of these questions, I think will, basis your situation, basis your ecosystem, basis your products, you will have to iterate on them, right? So basis what are the questions that deliver more value to you, you will have to adjust that. So for us, like for when it comes to discovery backlog, what are the variants of solutions that solve that problem, right? Which solution or a combination of solution solve that problem better? And how do we know that this will actually solve the problem, right? What are the side effects? How confident are we with the solution set? And what is the effort needed to kind of execute this, right? So cost versus effort. So all this basically helps me and my product teams to be able to be more efficient, and brings in a structure of like, these are things that would that anyone would expect when they see a story. And what we have seen is with executing this, I think one, we are very cognizant of what we deliver, what we develop, and second is the impact on the end user that we've been able to have because of this. It's amazing, right? I think I am super proud of the things that our teams have done, and this is one of the secret sauce that helped us in achieving those things. And I don't know how we are doing with time, but I would have loved to take an example and run this for you, but maybe we can just ask.
We have 10 minutes, Jasjit.
Okay, so maybe we can open up for questions, or do you want me to like run it via maybe an example or something like that?
How much time would you take for an example?
I don't know. So I would actually take an example if someone from the audience wants to run it, right? So
okay, so maybe we can just go for questions, and okay, and then we can try to understand people's interest. Okay, sure. Actually, someone from the audience asked for an example, so feel free to go.
Yeah. Let's take an example. Like for example, like in OLX, we were trying to launch this new checkout process, right? And the problem there was that a lot of people were dropping off when they kind of looked at the propositions page. So again, like so when it comes to OLX, right? When it comes to OLX in monetization, like we are trying to do sell more or sell faster in the classified space, and in that there is a proposition page wherein we show the products and then a checkout process behind that, right? A lot of when we looked at this, right, we saw a lot of people dropping off at the proposition page, right? So what we did was let's go back a little bit. We looked at like the problem, right? What problem we are trying to solve. We wanted to optimize on this drop, right? For whom are we trying to solve the problems? We looked at like the people who are landing on this page, and on this page, like we saw that a lot of our C2C customers, the customers who are participating in basically putting ads on the platform, are currently like they were dropping off, right? And how big is that opportunity? We saw about like about 60 odd % were dropping off, and there we saw that okay, it makes sense for us to kind of go into the market and understand that why this drop off is happening. When we went to the market, we went to for user research. We basically looked at like what was going on in the user's mind at that point of time. And what we figured is that people were not able to understand the different products that are there in that proposition page, and they were not able to relate to how it will help them sell faster, right? So that is where we kind of like okay looked at it, and we started doing more of a user education on that, and also giving him more context in that user journey so that he can kind of look at. So that was on the problem opportunity part. On the discovery part, we looked at like what are the various variants of which we can solve it. We looked at multi-checkout and basically bringing out the product proposition even better, right? And we had 3 or 4 various prototypes that we had built. And with those prototypes, we actually went back to the users for the usability testing. And basis the feedback, we kind of also redesigned that page and then did first experiment of taking it out and then looking at like how is it working with respect to the overall funnel, and what are the further opportunity areas in which we can improve. And eventually, I think we've been iterating on it, and the results are pretty good. So that's how we kind of take one of the problems and then maybe solve for it.
Okay, we actually have a couple of questions here on the Zoom Q&A. The first one relates to how do you define OKRs in OLX? I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about it, to use the traditional OKR definition. Do you have a twist to it?
Yeah, so we usually, like, from us, like, we follow the same OKR process that is there in the organization. There's nothing like OLX specific in that, but the only thing that we do more is also aligning with the stakeholders while we are defining that, and also getting more feedback into the thing, rather than like maybe doing it in silos and then going into or into the world. So that is more of a collaborative process wherein we kind of brainstorm and then align on what are the objectives and key results that we want to go after.
All right, just to maybe wrap it up, we have a question here from Atta. Hi, Jasjit, how much time would you recommend spending during the problem opportunity backlog versus validation? I think that's a very important question because lots of PMs struggle about time managing that.
Yeah, no, so it's a function of the risk of unknown or the risk itself, and the time you're willing to spend to mitigate that risk. If the risk is huge, you should definitely spend more time. If the risk is not huge, then in that case, you would want to kind of do more experiments, do small experiments, learn more, iterate. So that's typically how we kind of, that's the rule of thumb for us to kind of see that do we want to spend more time in validation or should we do some experiments and learn.
Okay, and we have another question for you, Jasjit. How to cascade OKRs into a big organization with multiple levels of PMs like OLX? OLX is huge. You know, lots of people maybe outside of India don't know that, but the OLX, how many people work for OLX nowadays?
Oh, so like like it's I think 4,000 or 5,000, right? I think it's a huge organization when it comes to including the sales and everyone. So the product organizations are pretty lean. They're about like about 200 odd, but otherwise the organization is pretty huge.
So how do you cascade OKRs into such a big organization?
So it's a function of like, I think it starts from the leadership. I think that is where it gets defined first, and then basically the next level leadership looks at what does it mean for them, right? How does it kind of map into the overall OKR, and then it cascades into one level other. Like, so we basically share our OKRs, and then like people add up to it so that it all makes sense in an organization. So that's what we typically do.
All right, and I think this is going to be our last one for you, Jasjit. So thanks for the talk. This is from Marek. Can you please explain more about what is the primary or secondary research, and in the context of the problem opportunity backlog, please?
Sure. So primary research is basically talking to your users and basically going to them and understanding their pain points. And by secondary research, I meant like maybe looking at their basically researching on the internet about what are the other models that are there, how are other people solving this, and basically not talking to your user, but getting a ecosystem point of view of how things are done.
All right. Thank you so much, Jasjit, for your excellent presentation.